Jinwoo Park stood at the viewing window of the transport ship and watched the massive space station grow larger. His hands pressed against the cool glass as he stared at Galactic University Station Omega-7. The station was bigger than any city he had ever seen on Earth. Metal towers stretched in all directions, connected by bridges that sparkled with lights. Ships of every shape and size moved around it like busy insects. "First time seeing the university?" asked a voice behind him. Jinwoo turned around to see a tall creature made of what looked like blue crystal. The being's body caught the light from the stars and threw rainbow colors across the walls. This was Thekmor, his new roommate. They had talked through video calls before, but seeing him in person was different. "Yes," Jinwoo said. "It's much bigger than I thought it would be." Thekmor's crystal face changed colors, which Jinwoo had learned meant he was happy. "Wait until you see the inside. The advanced biology department alone has 50 levels, and the library, it holds the knowledge of 200 worlds." The transport ship docked with a soft bump. Jinwoo grabbed his single bag and followed Thekmor through the airlock. The moment he stepped onto the station, he felt the difference. The air tasted clean but strange. The gravity was lighter than Earth's. Sounds echoed in ways that felt wrong to his ears. Beings of every type walked through the wide hallways. Some looked almost human but had different colored skin or extra arms. Others were completely alien. Floating clouds of gas, creatures that looked like walking plants, and things that hurt his eyes to look at directly. Many of them stared at Jinwoo as he passed. "They're curious about you," Thekmor explained as they walked. "Humans are new to the university. You're only the third one ever accepted, and the first in the advanced biology program." "What happened to the other two?" Jinwoo asked. "They studied mathematics and history. Much safer subjects." Thekmor's colors shifted to what Jinwoo thought might be worry. "Biology here is different from what you're used to. We study living creatures from many worlds. Some of them are dangerous. They entered a lift that moved sideways as much as up and down." Jinwoo's stomach did strange things as they traveled through the station. Finally, they reached the student housing section. The hallways here were quieter, with doors marked in symbols he couldn't read. Their room was large by human standards, but felt small when Thekmor was in it. The crystal being had special lights to help him stay healthy, and half the room glowed, with rainbow colors. Jinwoo's side was simple: a bed, a desk, and a small window that looked out at the stars. "Tell me about your classes," Thekmor said as Jinwoo unpacked his few things. "I'm taking advanced predator studies with Professor Zilthera," Jinwoo said. He pulled out a picture of his family and set it on the desk. "Also, comparative biology and alien psychology." Thekmor's entire body went dark for a moment. "Professor Zilthara's class. Are you sure that's wise?" "She's brilliant, but her methods are intense. Last semester, 3 students had to leave the program." "What do you mean?" "She believes in hands-on learning. Students work with live specimens, dangerous ones. Most beings from safe worlds can't handle it." Thekmor moved closer, his voice getting quieter. "There's a practical exam at the end of the semester. Students have to collect samples from living predators. Real predators, not recordings or dead specimens." Jinwoo felt a small chill run down his back, but he kept his face calm. "What kind of predators?" "From worlds much more dangerous than most. Creatures that hunt and kill for food. The kind that evolved to be perfect killers." Thekmor's colors kept changing, showing how worried he was. Most students spend months preparing. They use special suits, robotic tools, and strong drugs to keep the animals calm. That evening, Jinwoo went to the student cafeteria. The food was strange, but not bad. He sat alone at first, watching the other students. They moved in groups based on their species. The insect-like beings clustered together, making clicking sounds. The gas creatures floated near the ceiling. The plant people sat near the windows where they could get light. After a few minutes, 3 beings approached his table. The first was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 arms. The second looked like a giant praying mantis, but walked on. 2 legs. The third was hard to look at directly. It seemed to be made of moving light. "You're the human," said the blue-skinned one. His voice was musical. "I'm Velnix. These are my friends Kriva and Lumara. We're all in Professor Zilthara's class." Jinwoo nodded. "I'm Jinwoo Park. Nice to meet you." Kriva's insect head tilted to one side. "We heard you signed up for advanced predator studies. Is this true?" "Yes." The 3 beings looked at each other. Lumara's light body pulsed in patterns. That might have been worry. "Do you know what you're getting into? Humans come from what we call a death world, but even so—" "Death world?" Jinwoo asked. Velnix sat down across from him. "Earth. Your planet has so many ways to kill living things. Predators, diseases, weather, even the plants are dangerous. Most species in the galaxy evolved on much safer worlds. We learned to use tools and technology to survive. We never had to face the things you did. But that doesn't mean you can handle our predators," Kriva added quickly. "The creatures in Professor Zilthara's class come from worlds that make Earth look peaceful. And humans, well..." She paused as if trying to find polite words. "What Kriva means," Lumara said, her voice like music, "is that humans survived Earth through luck and intelligence, not through being strong or brave. Your species learned to hide and use tools. That won't help with a void worm or a razorback." Jinwoo listened to their words, but didn't feel insulted. They seemed genuinely worried about him. "What advice would you give me?" "Get the best protective gear you can," Velnix said immediately. "Study every safety protocol. Practice with the robotic systems until you can use them in your sleep. And pray to whatever gods your species believes in that you don't get one of the really dangerous specimens for your practical exam." The conversation continued for another hour. The 3 aliens told him about previous students who had failed the class. Some had been injured. Others had simply run away when faced with the live predators. A few had completed the course, but never been the same afterward. When Jinwoo finally returned to his room, Thekmor was waiting for him. The crystal being's colors were dim, a sign he was tired. "Did you meet other students from the class?" Thekmor asked. "Yes. They warned me about the practical exam." "Good. Maybe you'll transfer to a safer program." Thekmor's colors brightened with hope. Jinwoo looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, with its forests full of bears and wolves, its oceans full of sharks, its skies full of eagles. His grandfather had taught him about all of them during long camping trips in the mountains. "No," he said quietly. "I think I'll stay in the class." Thekmor's colors went completely dark. The biocontainment laboratory complex took up 3 entire levels of the university station. Jinwoo walked through the security checkpoint, where scanners looked at every part of his body. Guards checked his student ID twice before letting him pass. The hallways beyond were white and clean, with thick windows that showed glimpses of sealed rooms. Professor Zilthara was waiting in the main lecture hall. She was unlike anything Jinwoo had seen before. Her body looked like a giant octopus, but she stood upright on 4 thick tentacles while 4 others moved freely in the air. Her skin was dark purple and covered with patterns that changed color as she moved. 2 large eyes sat above a mouth full of small, sharp teeth. "Welcome to Advanced Predator Studies," she said. Her voice came from somewhere deep in her chest and echoed in the room. "This semester, you will learn about the galaxy's most dangerous hunters, not from books or videos, but by working with living specimens." 23 students sat in the lecture hall. Most looked nervous. A few tried to appear brave, but Jinwoo could see their hands shaking. Only he seemed calm, and that made several students look at him with confusion. Professor Zilthara's tentacles pointed to a large screen behind her. Images of terrifying creatures appeared one by one. "These are your test subjects for the final practical examination. Each of you will be assigned 1 creature. Your job will be to collect biological samples without harming yourself or the animal." The first image showed something that looked like a bear, but larger and covered with metal scales. Its claws gleamed like knives. "The Andromedan razorback," Professor Zilthara explained. "It can smell fear from 2 kilometers away and has never been successfully kept in captivity for more than 6 months. They always find a way to escape or die trying." Kriva made a small, chittering sound of fear. The next image was worse. The creature looked like it was made of shadows, with teeth that glowed in the dark. "The Vegan stalker. Perfect camouflage. Perfect patience. It can wait motionless for days before striking. Its bite injects a paralytic poison that keeps prey alive but unable to move." Several students whispered to each other. 2 got up and left the room. The final image made everyone go silent. The creature was long and snake-like, but with legs and wings. Its scales were black as space, covered with spots that glowed like stars. Even in the picture, it looked intelligent and angry. "The Void Worm, apex predator from the Dark Zone. This is a juvenile. Adults are 50 meters long. They hunt by sensing electrical fields in living beings. Some scientists believe they're actually more intelligent than most galactic species." Velnix raised one of his 4 hands. "Professor, surely we won't be working with the Void Worm directly?" "Professor." Zilthara's pattern shifted to what might have been amusement. "Every creature on this list is a possible assignment. The practical exam determines 50% of your final grade. There are no makeup exams." After the lecture, the class moved to the laboratory section. Here, Professor Zilthara showed them the equipment they would use. Protective suits hung along the walls like empty shells. They were thick and bulky, with their own air supply and built-in cooling systems. "These suits can stop most claws and teeth," the professor explained, "but they're heavy and slow. You must learn to move carefully while wearing them." Next came the robotic arms. These were controlled from outside the containment areas and could extend up to 20 meters. Students practiced picking up small objects with them, but most struggled to make them work smoothly. "The robots have their own problems," Professor Zilthara said. "They're slow and the connection sometimes fails. Predators can sense when something isn't alive. Some will attack the robots, others will ignore them completely." The sedation equipment looked like weapons from a war movie. Dart guns, gas dispensers, and devices that made high-pitched sounds that could stun certain animals. These work on some species, but not others. The void worm, for example, seems to enjoy most sedatives. They make it more playful, not less dangerous. Jinwoo watched his classmates struggle with the equipment. They treated every piece of gear like it might save their lives, which it probably would. But they also seemed to think the technology alone would keep them safe. During the practical sessions, students practiced on harmless animals from peaceful worlds. Even with these gentle creatures, most of his classmates were terrified. They wore full protection to collect samples from something that looked like a space rabbit. Velnik spent 40 minutes trying to get close to a creature that was basically a floating ball of fur. He used the robotic arms, the protective suit, and 2 different types of scanners. When he finally got his sample, he was shaking so hard he could barely hold the collection tube. "Excellent work, Velnix," Professor Zilthara said. "Very thorough. Safety procedures. Kriva did better with the next animal, something like a 6-legged deer, but she still used every piece of safety equipment available and took over an hour to complete the task. When it was Jinwoo's turn, he surprised everyone. The test animal was a small predator from a low-gravity world. It looked like a cat with too many teeth and eyes that glowed red. The other students expected him to suit up like they had. Instead, Jinwoo just walked into the containment area wearing normal clothes. He moved slowly and kept his hands visible. The predator watched him, but didn't seem afraid or aggressive. Jinwoo knelt down a few meters away and waited. After a minute, the creature moved closer. Jinwoo didn't move toward it, but he didn't back away either. He let it sniff his hand. Then, very gently, he collected the needed sample from its fur. The whole process took less than 10 minutes. The other students stared at him. Professor Zilthara's skin patterns changed rapidly, which Jinwoo was learning meant she was very interested. "Interesting technique, Jinwoo Park," she said. "Can you explain your approach?" Jinwoo shrugged. "It didn't seem afraid of me, so I wasn't afraid of it. My grandfather taught me that most animals only attack when they feel threatened. And if it had attacked, then I would have moved away. But it was more curious than angry. After class, Velnix, Kriva, and Lumara surrounded Jinwoo in the hallway. "That was incredible," Velnix said. "How did you know it wouldn't hurt you?" "I didn't know for sure, but it was a small predator in an enclosed space with nowhere to run. If I had come in wearing a big suit and carrying weapons, it would have been scared. Scared animals are dangerous animals." Kriva's insect head tilted. "But what if you were wrong? What if it had decided to attack anyway?" Jinwoo thought about his grandfather's stories of meeting wild bears in the Korean mountains. "Then I would have dealt with it. But most predators don't want to fight unless they have to. Fighting means they might get hurt, and injured predators don't survive long." Lumara's light body pulsed thoughtfully. "This is very different from how we were taught to handle dangerous animals." "How were you taught?" "That all predators are killers waiting for a chance to attack. That technology and distance are the only things that keep us safe." Jinwoo nodded. "That might be true for some predators, but not all of them." The conversation continued as they walked to the cafeteria. The 3 aliens were fascinated by Jinwoo's different approach, but they also seemed worried about it. "The final exam won't be with cute little creatures like today," Kriva warned. "Professor Zilthara will bring in real monsters, things that have killed people." "I know," Jinwoo said. "And you're still planning to take the exam?" "Of course." Velnik stopped walking. "Jinwoo, I don't think you understand. These aren't Earth predators. They come from worlds where everything is designed to kill. They're bigger, faster, and smarter than anything your planet ever produced." Jinwoo looked at his new friends. They were genuinely concerned about him, which he appreciated, but they didn't understand what growing up on Earth had taught him. Maybe, he said, but they're still animals, and animals follow patterns. If you understand the patterns, you can predict what they'll do. That night, Jinwoo sat in his room, reading about the creatures they might face in the final exam. Thekmor watched him with worried crystal eyes. The other students are already ordering custom protective equipment, Thekmor said. Velnik spent his entire allowance on a new robotic control system. Jinwoo looked up from his reading. What about you? Are you worried about your final exams? Mine are all theoretical. No dangerous animals involved. Thekmor's colors shifted to concerned patterns. Jinwoo, I've been researching human biology. Your species is much more fragile than you seem to think. One bite from a void worm would kill you instantly. Probably, Jinwoo agreed. So I won't let it bite me. Thekmor's colors went completely dark, which Jinwoo had learned meant he was either very sad or very frustrated. The high-security predator containment arena was built like a fortress. Jinwoo walked through 3 different airlock doors, each one thicker than the last. Armed guards checked his student ID at every checkpoint. The walls were made of transparent metal strong enough to stop a starship blast. The arena itself was huge, bigger than a football stadium. The floor could be changed to match different environments. Sand for desert predators, water for ocean hunters, or rocky surfaces for mountain creatures. Above the arena, viewing platforms held hundreds of seats where students and faculty could watch in safety. Today was the final practical examination for advanced predator studies. Jinwoo looked around at his remaining classmates. The class had started with 23 students. Now only 11 were left. The others had dropped out after seeing what they would face in the final exam. Professor Zilthara stood in the center of the arena. Her tentacles were bright red with excitement. Welcome to your final examination. Each of you will face a different predator. You have 1 hour to collect the required biological samples. Medical teams are standing by, and emergency extraction is available if needed. Along one wall of the arena sat 5 massive containment units. Each one was the size of a small building, with walls so thick that Jinwoo couldn't see what was inside. Strange sounds came from within. Growls, clicks, and noises that hurt his ears. The other students were already wearing their protective gear. Velnix looked like a walking tank in his custom suit. Robotic arms extended from his back like metal tentacles. His helmet had 3 different types of vision enhancement and could analyze air quality in real time. Kriva had chosen a different approach. Her suit was lighter, but covered in sensors that could detect movement from any direction. She carried a device that could project holographic images to confuse predators. Her backup plan involved instant freeze foam that could trap most creatures for several minutes. Lumara had the most expensive equipment of all. Being an energy creature, she was naturally vulnerable to physical attack. Her suit contained her, light body completely, and came with weapons that could fire stunning electrical blasts. She had practiced for weeks with robotic duplicates of various predators. Other students had their own preparations. Some carried multiple sedation devices. Others had suits that could become completely rigid if attacked, turning the wearer into a statue until help arrived. Everyone had spent months preparing and thousands of credits on the best equipment available. Everyone except Jinwoo. He stood in the arena wearing simple clothes, dark pants, a plain shirt, and comfortable shoes. He carried only the basic sample collection tools that the university provided. No protective suit, no weapons, no robotic helpers. Professor Zilthara approached him. Jinwoo Park, this is your final chance to reconsider. I can arrange for you to take a theoretical exam instead. Thank you, Professor, but I'm ready for this. Her tentacles changed color to confused patterns. Where is your protective equipment? I decided not to use any. A gasp went through the viewing platforms above. Even the medical teams looked shocked. Professor Zilthara stared at him for a long moment. Very well, but I must warn you. If you show any sign of being in real danger, the emergency extraction team will remove you from the arena immediately. You will fail the course, but you will live. I understand. Professor Zilthara moved to the center of the arena. We will begin with random selection. Each student will draw a number that corresponds to one of our specimens. A small robot rolled out carrying a container with numbered balls inside. One by one, the students drew their assignments. Velnix went first. He drew number 3 and looked relieved. Andromedan Razorback, Professor Zilthara announced. This was one of the easier predators, though still extremely dangerous. Kriva drew number 1. Quantari Depth Hunter. This was a creature from a high-pressure water world. Difficult to handle, but not the worst possible choice. Lumara got number 4. Nexus Swarm Queen, an intelligent insect predator that could control smaller creatures with pheromones. Very tricky, but manageable with the right equipment. Other students drew their numbers. Each announcement brought either relief or worry, depending on what they got. Soon, only Jinwoo and one other student were left. The remaining numbers were 2 and 5. The other student, a nervous being that looked like a walking crystal tree, drew number 2. Theta System Pain Beast, Professor Zilthara said. The crystal student immediately fainted and had to be carried away by medics. That left Jinwoo with number 5. Professor Zilthara's skin turned completely black. A color Jinwoo had never seen before. The entire arena went silent. Void Worm, juvenile specimen, she announced. The sound that came from the viewing platforms was not quite a gasp and not quite a scream. Several students stood up as if they were going to run. Even the medical teams looked worried. Jinwoo felt his heartbeat faster, but he kept his face calm. He had been hoping for one of the easier predators, but somehow he wasn't surprised by this result. Jinwoo Park, Professor Zilthara said, I strongly recommend you accept emergency extraction now. No student has ever successfully completed an assignment with a void worm. What happened to the students who tried? 3 were killed, 2 were permanently disabled. 1 refused to enter the containment area at all. Jinwoo nodded. I understand the risk, but I'd like to try. Professor Zilthara stared at him for a long moment. Then she gestured to the first containment unit. Velnix, you may begin your examination. The massive door of Containment Unit 3 rolled open. Inside was an environment that looked like the surface of an alien moon, red sand, strange rock formations, and gravity that seemed lighter than normal. In the center of the space, a creature the size of a small truck was sleeping. The Andromedan Razorback looked exactly like its pictures, but somehow worse in person. Its fur was metallic gray, and its claws were actually made of some kind of living metal. Each claw was as long as Jinwoo's arm and sharp enough to cut through steel. Velnix approached very slowly. His robotic arms extended ahead of him while he stayed as far back as possible. The Razorback woke up and immediately focused on the movement. It didn't attack, but it watched everything Velnix did. The process took 47 minutes. Velnix used sedation darts to make the creature drowsy, then carefully collected fur and saliva samples with his robotic arms. When the Razorback moved, suddenly he activated an emergency barrier that protected him until it calmed down again. When he finally finished, Velnix was shaking so hard he could barely walk. But he had succeeded, and the viewing platforms erupted in cheers. Kriva went next. Her creature was kept in a water-filled environment that looked like the bottom of an ocean. The Quantari Depth Hunter was long and thin like an eel, but with too many fins and eyes that glowed blue in the dark water. Kriva had to enter the water in a special diving suit. The Depth Hunter tried to wrap around her several times, but her suit was too slippery for it to get a good grip. She used sonic disruptors to keep it confused while she collected scale and tissue samples. Her examination took 51 minutes, but she also succeeded. The crowd cheered again, though not as loudly as before. Everyone was thinking about what was coming next. Lumara faced her swarm queen in an environment that looked like a jungle made of metal trees. The queen was the size of a large dog, but she controlled dozens of smaller insects that flew around her like living weapons. Lumara used her electrical weapons to stun the smaller insects while staying far enough away to avoid the queen's acid spit. Her energy body gave her an advantage. She could move faster than physical beings and didn't need to breathe the dangerous pheromones the queen released. She completed her task in 39 minutes and left the containment area to loud applause. Other students followed. Some succeeded. Others failed and had to be extracted by emergency teams. But all of them used the same approach: maximum protection, maximum distance, maximum technology. Finally, it was Jinwoo's turn. Containment Unit 5 was different from the others. The door was thicker, and warning lights flashed all around it. Armed guards took positions around the arena, and the medical teams moved closer. Professor Zilthara approached Jinwoo one last time. This is truly your final chance to reconsider. What you're about to face is not just a predator, it's one of the most dangerous creatures known to science. Jinwoo looked up at the viewing platforms. Hundreds of beings were watching him. Some looked excited. Others looked horrified. All of them thought he was about to die. He thought about his grandfather, who had taught him to track deer through the mountains of Korea. He thought about the wild dogs that had followed them one winter, and how his grandfather had faced them down with nothing but calm confidence and understanding. "I'm ready, Professor." The massive door began to roll open. Inside was darkness so complete that Jinwoo couldn't see anything at first. Then, slowly, points of light began to appear. They looked like stars, but they were moving in patterns that stars never moved in. The Void Worm was awake, and it was watching him. The Void Worm's containment area was designed to look like deep space. The floor, walls, and ceiling were black as night, covered with tiny lights that looked like distant stars. There was no gravity in the space, so everything floated freely. The air was cold and thin, like breathing on top of a mountain. Jinwoo stepped through the doorway and immediately felt the change. His feet left the ground as he entered the zero-gravity environment. Behind him, he heard gasps from the viewing platforms. Professor Zilthara was saying something into her communicator, probably telling the medical teams to be ready. The Void Worm was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It was about 10 meters long, small for its species, but still much larger than any Earth predator Jinwoo had ever seen. Its body was like a snake's, but with 4 powerful legs and 2 wings that it used to move through the zero gravity. Its scales were deep black, but patterns of light moved across them like living constellations. The creature's head was the most frightening part. It was shaped like a dragon from old stories, but with too many eyes. 6 of them, arranged around its skull, and all of them were looking at Jinwoo. Its teeth were white as stars and longer than his fingers. For a moment, neither of them moved. Jinwoo floated just inside the doorway while the void worm hung in the center of the space watching him. The patterns on its scales pulsed faster, which he guessed meant it was excited or maybe angry. From outside the containment area, he could hear Professor Zilthara speaking to her assistants. Heart rate elevated but stable. No signs of panic. What is he waiting for? Jinwoo was waiting because his grandfather had taught him to always observe before acting. Watch the animal, understand its mood, learn its body language. Never make the first move unless you have to. The void worm's head tilted to one side like a curious dog. The light patterns on its scales changed from quick pulses to slow waves. Its wings spread slightly, but not in a threatening way. More like it was trying to get a better look at him. Jinwoo began to move forward, using his hands against the walls to push himself through the zero gravity. He moved slowly and kept his hands visible. The void worm watched every movement, but it didn't seem afraid or angry. It seemed interested. When he was about 5 meters away, the creature made a sound. It was like whale song mixed with the purr of a giant cat. The sound echoed through the containment area and made Jinwoo's bones vibrate. On the viewing platforms, several beings covered their ears, but Jinwoo didn't think it was a threatening sound. Animals made different noises for different reasons. This sounded more like curiosity than aggression. He stopped moving and waited to see what the creature would do next. The void worm moved closer. Its body flowed through the zero gravity like it was swimming through water. As it moved, Jinwoo could see that it was very young. Its movements had the awkward grace of a teenager who hadn't fully grown into their body yet. When it was close, enough to touch him, it stopped. The light patterns on its scales were moving in slow, regular waves now. Jinwoo had read that this was usually a sign of calm interest in void worms. The creature tilted its massive head and looked at him with all 6 eyes. "Emergency extraction team, stand by," came Professor Zilthara's voice over the speakers. Jinwoo ignored her. He was focused completely on the creature in front of him. Very slowly, he extended one hand toward it, palm up. The gesture was one his grandfather had taught him for approaching nervous animals. Non-threatening, offering contact, but not forcing it. The void worm's head moved closer to his hand. Jinwoo could feel the heat coming off its body and smell its breath, which was surprisingly pleasant, like ozone after a lightning storm. The creature sniffed at his hand with nostrils he could barely see. Then something amazing happened. The void worm gently touched his hand with the tip of its nose. The contact sent a small shock through Jinwoo's body. Not painful, but like the static electricity he sometimes felt on dry days. The creature's scales were smooth and warm, and the light patterns under them pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Impossible," he heard someone whisper over the speakers. The void worm seemed to enjoy the contact. It pressed its nose more firmly against his hand, then moved its head so he could touch the scales along its neck. The light patterns there pulsed brighter when he made contact. Jinwoo understood what was happening. The creature was alone in this artificial space, probably had been alone for months. It was intelligent enough to be bored and curious about new things. When a strange new being entered its territory, without showing fear or aggression, It responded with interest rather than hostility. Moving very carefully, Jinwoo reached into his pocket and pulled out the sample collection tools. The void worm watched but didn't seem concerned. It had decided that this strange, fearless creature was not a threat. Collecting the samples was easier than it had been with any of the practice animals. The void worm seemed to understand what he was doing and cooperated completely. When he needed a scale sample, it angled its body so he could reach a loose scale near its neck. When he needed saliva, it opened its mouth and let him use a swab on its teeth. The whole process took 12 minutes. When he was finished, the void worm made that purring whale song sound again. The light patterns on its scales formed what looked almost like a smile, if snakes could smile. Then it did something that made everyone watching gasp in amazement. It gently wrapped one wing around Jinwoo's shoulders like a hug. The contact was warm and surprisingly gentle. Jinwoo could feel the creature's contentment through the wing touching him. For just a moment, he understood why some scientists thought void worms might be more intelligent than most galactic species. There was definitely a mind behind those. 6 eyes, a mind that was capable of loneliness and friendship. "Sample collection complete," he said into his communicator. "Jinwoo Park, exit the containment area immediately." Professor Zilthara's voice was tight with worry. But the void worm didn't want him to leave. It made a questioning sound, and the light patterns on its scales turned into what looked like sadness. Jinwoo gently extracted himself from its wing and backed toward the door. "I have to go," he said to the creature, though he wasn't sure if it could understand him. The void worm followed him to the door, but stopped when it reached the edge of its containment area. It watched him leave with all 6 eyes, and the light patterns on its scales pulsed in slow, sad waves. Jinwoo exited the containment area to complete silence. The arena was so quiet, he could hear the hum of the air recycling systems. Hundreds of beings stared at him from the viewing platforms, their mouths open in shock. Professor Zilthara approached him, her tentacles changing color so rapidly they looked like flashing lights. "How?" she asked. "How did you do that?" "Do what?" "Survive. Complete the assignment. Make contact with a void worm without protective equipment or weapons." Jinwoo looked back at the containment area. Through the transparent door, he could see the young void worm still watching him, its scales pulsing with lonely light patterns. It was lonely, he said simply, and curious. It didn't want to hurt anyone. It just wanted some company. But the reports, the previous students who were killed, they probably went in scared and aggressive, wearing armor, carrying weapons, trying to drug it or control it with robots. Jinwoo shrugged. "If something treated you that way, you'd probably fight back too." The medical team surrounded him, checking for injuries they were sure he must have. But except for a few small electrical burns where the creature had touched him, he was completely unharmed. Professor Zilthara stared at his sample containers. The collections were perfect, better than any she had seen in 20 years of teaching. "The university needs to analyze these immediately. If what you've done can be replicated—" "Professor?" Jinwoo interrupted. "Yes? That creature in there is very intelligent and very lonely. Maybe instead of just using it for tests, someone should spend time with it. I think it would like that." Professor Zilthara looked back at the containment area. The void worm was still visible through the door, its light patterns slow and sad. "Perhaps," she said thoughtfully, "perhaps that would be educational." As the medical team finished their examination and the other students crowded around him with questions, Jinwoo kept thinking about the young void worm. On Earth, his grandfather had always said that the most dangerous animals were often just misunderstood. Maybe that was true throughout the galaxy. Behind him, Professor Zilthara was already talking to her assistants about changing their research protocols, and in the viewing platforms above, hundreds of alien students were reconsidering everything they thought they knew about predators, danger, and the strange species called humans. The University Medical Center was buzzing with activity. Doctors from 12 different species examined Jinwoo from every possible angle. They took blood samples, brain scans, and tests he didn't even have names for. All of them wanted to understand how a human had survived direct contact with a void worm. "Your stress hormone levels are completely normal," said Dr. Yilan, a spider-like being with 8 delicate arms. "Most students show elevated stress for days after their practical exams. You show no signs of trauma whatsoever." "Should I be traumatized?" Jinwoo asked. "You made physical contact with one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, without protection, without weapons, without sedation." Dr. Yilan's 8 eyes blinked in sequence. "By all accounts, you should be dead." While the doctors ran their tests, news of what had happened spread throughout the university. Students from every department came to see the human who had befriended a void worm. The footage from the arena was played over and over on the university's information network. Professor Zilthara called Jinwoo to her office 3 days after the practical exam. Her office was filled with specimens from dangerous worlds. Things floating in jars, crystals that pulsed with their own light, and plants that moved when he wasn't looking directly at them. "I've been reviewing the recordings of your examination," she said. Her tentacles were calm now, moving in slow, thoughtful patterns. "I've also been researching human evolutionary history." "Oh? Humans are the only known species that evolved alongside their predators instead of hiding from them or developing technology to overcome them." She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's evolutionary tree. Most intelligent species developed in safe environments. When they encountered predators, they built walls, weapons, or left their home planets entirely. Jinwoo nodded. "That makes sense. But humans stayed. For millions of years, your species lived in the same environments as creatures designed to kill you. You learned to read their behavior, understand their psychology, even work with some of them." Professor Zilthara's display showed images of early humans hunting alongside wolves, farming with oxen, and riding horses into battle. "My grandfather always said that animals aren't evil," Jinwoo said. "They're just trying to survive, same as everyone else." This perspective is completely unique in galactic academia. We've always studied predators as problems to be solved, not as individuals to be understood. Professor Zilthara moved closer, her patterns bright with excitement. "Your approach could revolutionize how we study dangerous species." That afternoon, Jinwoo returned to the Advanced Predator Studies classroom for the final lecture of the semester. The room was packed with students who weren't even enrolled in the class. Word had spread that Professor Zilthara was going to announce the grades and discuss what had happened during the practical exam. Velnix was there with his arm in a healing brace. The Andromedan Razorback had managed to swipe at him during his examination, though his protective suit had prevented serious injury. Kriva had completed her assignment successfully, but was still shaking whenever anyone mentioned the Quantari, Depth Hunter. Lumara had passed, but announced she was changing her major to something safer, like theoretical physics. This semester, we had 11 students brave enough to face their practical examinations. Professor Zilthara began. 8 of them successfully collected the required samples. This is our highest success rate in over 10 years. Scattered applause filled the room. However, one student achieved something that has forced us to reconsider our entire approach to, predator studies. Professor Zilthara's tentacles pointed at Jinwoo. Jinwoo Park not only completed his assignment with a void worm, but did so in record time and with no protective equipment whatsoever. The applause was much louder this time. More importantly, his success wasn't due to luck or special technology. It was due to understanding. He approached a dangerous predator not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a living being to be respected. Professor Zilthara's patterns showed deep thinking colors. This represents a fundamental shift in how we might study dangerous species throughout the galaxy. After the lecture, dozens of students surrounded Jinwoo with questions. How had he known the void worm wouldn't attack? What signs had he looked for? Could his techniques be taught to others? I don't know if it can be taught, Jinwoo said honestly. My grandfather spent years showing me how to read animal behavior. It's not just knowledge, it's practice and instinct and lots of trial and error. But surely there are basic principles? Asked a student that looked like a walking tree. Jinwoo thought about it. Fear makes everything more dangerous. If you're afraid, the animal knows it and might attack because it thinks you're weak. If you're aggressive, it might attack because it thinks you're a threat. But if you're calm and respectful, the animal responds with curiosity instead of violence, finished Velnix. His injured arm was healing well, and he was already talking about taking advanced classes next semester. Sometimes, but not always. Some animals are just mean, and others are too hungry or too sick to care about respect. Jinwoo shrugged. Each situation is different. The conversation continued for hours. Students from biology, psychology, and even engineering wanted to hear about the human approach to dealing with dangerous situations. Several professors took notes and talked about incorporating new teaching methods into their classes. As the crowd finally began to disperse, Thekmor approached Jinwoo. His crystal body was bright with happy colors. I was wrong about you, he said. When you first arrived, I thought humans had survived Earth through luck and hiding. I didn't understand that you had survived by learning to live with danger instead of just avoiding it. Most humans probably would have used the protective equipment, Jinwoo said. I'm not special. I just grew up differently. Perhaps. But the results speak for themselves. That evening, Jinwoo received a message from the university administration. His practical exam had been scored as not just passing, but perfect. The first perfect score in advanced predator studies in the university's 847-year history. More importantly, 3 different research departments wanted to offer him positions studying human-predator interaction techniques. The xenobiology department wanted him to help develop new protocols for studying dangerous species. The psychology department was interested in his insights about cross-species communication. The comparative evolution department wanted to research how Earth's unique evolutionary environment had shaped human instincts and abilities. You're going to be famous, Thekmor said as they read through the offers together. I just want to finish my degree, Jinwoo replied. But maybe I can help other students learn to work with dangerous animals instead of just fearing them. A week later, Jinwoo found himself back in the high-security predator containment arena. But this time, he wasn't alone. Professor Zilthara had arranged for him to return to the Void Worm's containment area, not for testing, but for what she called behavioral observation research. The young Void Worm remembered him. The moment he entered the containment area, its scales lit up with patterns that looked like joy. It approached him immediately, making that purring whale song sound that had terrified the other students. "Hello, again," Jinwoo said, extending his hand. The creature touched his hand with its nose, then wrapped one wing around his shoulders in another gentle hug. For several minutes they just stayed like that, human and predator sharing a moment of companionship across the vast differences between their species. Professor Zilthara watched from outside the containment area, taking detailed notes. "Remarkable," she murmured to her assistants. "The creature shows clear signs of affection and trust. We've never observed this behavior in any void worm before." Over the following weeks, Jinwoo visited the young void worm regularly. Each time, the creature seemed happier and more active. Its scales became brighter, and it began exploring its containment area with renewed curiosity instead of just floating listlessly in one spot. The other predators in the facility began to show changes, too. When Jinwoo approached their containment areas with the same calm, respectful attitude he showed the Void Worm, they responded with curiosity rather than aggression. Soon, other students were asking to observe his interactions, trying to learn. From his techniques, the news spread beyond the university. Scientific journals throughout the galaxy published papers about the human-predator interaction method. Researchers from dozens of worlds requested permission to study Jinwoo's techniques. The University of Centauri offered him a full scholarship to continue his studies there. But Jinwoo decided to stay at Galactic University Station Omega 7. There was still too much to learn, too many dangerous species that might benefit from a little understanding instead of just fear and technology. 6 months later, he stood once again in Professor Zilthara's Advanced Predator Studies classroom. But this time, he wasn't a student. He was a teaching assistant, helping to show new students that the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy weren't necessarily their enemies. The most important thing to remember, he told the new class, is that every predator is an individual. Some will respond to respect and understanding. Others won't. Your job is to learn the difference and react accordingly.